Hey folks, welcome back to class and happy Tuesday. Hope you're all doing well finishing up your multi-text performances this morning. I once again really enjoyed the chance to chat with you about those during our workshops, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what the finished results are today. So thank you for all of your hard work. Really looking forward to seeing how those come out. So today, this little lecture is just to go through your final performance requirements and your final exam instructions. So I just wanted to just be clear right off the bat that your final performances and your final exams are sort of a piece. Your final exam isn't going to be during our final exam period. It will be due at the beginning of our final exam period. But it is going to be more of a writing assignment than it is going to be a traditional exam. Much like your last exam asked you to analyze the performances of your peers, this exam is just going to ask you to justify and discuss your own final performances in a specific lens, which is as a proposal to a granting organization for funding. So we'll get to that specifically, but I just wanted to start off by pointing out that you should not think about this as being a standard sort of exam that there's going to be an extensive review session for or anything like that. This will be open book and open note again, and the idea is that you're going to write about what your final project was, much in the way that you've been writing about it in bits and pieces when you're mapping things out so far. So hopefully this won't be too much of a burden or a work crunch or anything. I'm hoping that writing about the project for your final examination and creating your final performance sort of work hand in hand together. So in this lecture, then, we're just going to briefly go over the assignment instructions for both the final exam and the final performance. We'll start with the final performance. Any questions at all, always feel free to email me. So to start out then, we have the normal sort of description or catalyst section that says, over the course of the semester, we've explored performance not only as a mode of personal and artistic expression, but as a form that values collaboration and participatory actions with audiences and other performers. We've also discussed the social, political, and cultural value of performance, focusing on its value to exploring issues related to race, gender, and class, and its activist uses. So I wanted to start off just by clarifying really quickly that the readings for tomorrow are more about participatory performance and about activist performance. Those are the two readings you're going to read tomorrow. So some of the things that we've discussed here, we're going to be discussing in more detail tomorrow, and you might find inspiration or motivation for what you want to do in some of the discussions that we have during our lecture tomorrow. But in any case, though, we have, I think, been discussing all of these things over the course of the semester, and the idea for your final performance is that you're going to create a performance that's designed to educate or promote change surrounding an issue you or your group, and we'll get to that in a second, deem to be of pressing political importance. So you're going to think about this as a performance intervention. You're saying, here is a problem. This is the way in which we are using performance in some way to intervene in that problem, to educate people around that problem, to promote change surrounding that problem. That is going to be the basic motivation behind the performance that you design. In terms of the specific instructions for the performance, I'm giving you the option of doing one of two things, but you can put them together if you want to, depending on how ambitious you're feeling. So I'm giving you the option of either working in a group or working individually. Either working in a group or individually. So you can choose 1 to 2 group members to work with if you want to. And if you do a group project, what I'm asking you to do is to create a performance that synthesizes the multi-text performances that you have all done individually. So in other words, the objective is to, along with your group members, take each one of your multi-text performances, talk about how they can or are in dialogue with one another, and then create a new performance out of those multi-text performances in which you are putting each one of your performances in dialogue or synthesizing them together into something more cohesive. So you would just think about it then as taking each one of your peers' performances as their own text and creating a new multi-text performance out of your existing multi-text performances. So that is your first option. And in doing this, I say that there should contain two clear moments of interaction. And remember, because this is COVID-19, these should be either done in a mediated fashion, so you might be editing videos online and sending files to each other, or you might be participating in a more socially distanced fashion where you are working together in person, but make sure that you are not being socially distant and you were wearing masks and things like that, except for in moments where you were individually performing, unless, for instance, you happen to already live with your collaborator or something like that. But in general, the idea is that you could do this digitally through sending each other files and video clips, and that there should be two clear moments in which you are putting the work that one of you has done or one of your performances within the broader spectrum of your performance in dialogue with the other performers. So there need to be moments, in other words, in which you are actively collaborating with your peer group or with the people you've chosen to work with, and that should be clear to us. Again, you can be experimental about everything, and you can be experimental about how these moments of dialogue or interaction work. But the idea is if you choose this, there have to be at least two clear moments of collaboration or interaction between you and your collaborators, in addition to the requirements that we'll talk about at the end that apply to everybody. And then, so the next part is the general description of your objective, which is this should productively combine your multi-text performances to create a clear dialogue between your prior work and produce something performatively new that continues to explore the themes we've been discussing this semester. So the idea then is simply that you are, as we said, taking your performances and putting them together to try to produce something new in a creative manner. I do specify here that there needs to be an even role that's played between you and all of your peers. So one of you should not be giving 4 minutes of the performance, and one of you is giving 1 minute of the performance. That would obviously not look like a just or equal division of labor or a sufficient collaboration. So just make sure that it is balanced. If you do choose to create something new together, and maybe one person is like creating all of the music and the other person is creating all of the poetry, then just let me know so I get a sense of the idea that work is going clearly, or I'm sorry, work is being divided equitably or equally. And obviously, if you select a partner and you have problems with this, please get in contact with me, but hopefully, because peer group work is optional, if you do form a peer group, you will pull your weight as far as those things go. I don't really expect that to be an issue because all of you have been really going above and beyond so far this semester. So that's your first option. Your second option is to, as an individual, or again, you can do this as a group if you want to. You can explore what a site-specific or interactive performance might look like, or an activist performance might look like, in the context of a future in which most performance will be digital in nature or have to otherwise adapt to a post-pandemic world. So, in other words, the normal requirement for this final performance is that you do something that is an interactive performance in which you are actually calling upon members of the audience to participate in what you're performing. That obviously isn't as clearly possible now given our context. So the idea is that you would create a performance that explores what the possibilities of performing might be and what the possibility of doing activist performances, site-specific, meaning they would have to be in a certain place, and in this circumstance, that certain place could be a social media platform, or interactive performances, what all of these things that would normally depend on you being able to be out in public, what would that look like if, or what is that going to look like when we transition into a world in which in-person performances are not going to happen as often? So, for example, you might consider performing your work live on Instagram or on Facebook, or creating a piece that you post online that invites your audience to interact with what you've produced in some other kind of way. You could also conceive of a performance that would be mobilized in a socially distant capacity or at one of the protests that's going on right now that is somehow responsive to our present moment and its restrictions. And as usual, I encourage you to be creative here. What is important about this is that you can choose to actually do the public aspect of this. So if you wanted to go and do some sort of socially distant street performance and videotape that, or if you wanted to go online and create an interactive Facebook performance and actually interact with your Facebook friends or your Instagram followers, all of that would be totally okay, but there is no obligation for you to do that. I know that we've been talking about really personal issues here and also issues that have political and social relevance, and you might not feel comfortable sharing your work online, and I'm not going to make you. So if you do decide that you actually want to go through and publicly share your work, you need to make sure that all of your group members are okay with that. But if you don't publicly share your work, what I need you to do is to just make sure that your performance is prepared in a way that reflects how you would be mobilizing it digitally or incorporating moments of interaction or performing in a specific place or in a specific context. So in other words, if you were to create a Facebook post or if you were planning on doing a digital media performance, you should go through and creating the post. Just don't post it, screenshot it in some way, present it to us in a way that makes it clear what your plans were or what you would do in this context. And similarly, you might not be able to go to an actual protest, but perhaps you could put a slideshow or a video clip around you, behind you when you're performing that makes it seem as if you are at a protest. So the idea here isn't that I want to put you either in direct way of the coronavirus or make you socially alienate yourself from your friends and family by posting something provocative on Facebook. The idea is just that I want you to think about how you might go about staging these performances. And if you don't stage them in public, just you want to think about it like you're making a video or an audio performance of a body gesture or something, like we've been talking about it the whole time. Just make it clear to us this would be a moment of interaction, or this would be a moment of participation when you're performing. This would be a moment in which we're in a specific place. This is how the interactive Facebook video would work. And in that circumstance, I mean, you do want this to be as embodied and performed as possible, but the idea is just that you are presenting the material. You don't actually have to go through with the public performance if you don't want to. So hopefully that is clear enough for the general requirements. Obviously, feel free to reach out to me if you have subsequent questions. But the idea, oh, sorry, one quick clarification is that both groups are building on their multi-text performances. So the interactive digital performance that you're doing should still be incorporating a lot of the elements from your multi-text performance, if not all of it. You're just expanding and adapting it to be participatory, to be in this new context of being online if you're doing the second one, or you're adapting it in collaboration with a group member if you're doing the first one. And again, you can do both. So you can form a group and decide you want to do something interactive online. And that is totally fine by me. So I always encourage you to be as creative as you want. So, in terms of general requirements, then, on top of everything that we just talked about, substance wise, the general requirements for this are that the performance should be 6 to 7 minutes if you're working in a group, and 4 to 6 minutes if you're working as an individual. So, 6 to 7 minutes if you're working in a group, 4 to 6 minutes for individuals. You should make, as we've talked about before, 2 clear spatial choices, 2 clear symbolic choices, 2 clear moments of gesture, 1 clear non-word sound choice, and a clear incorporation and revision of your multi-text performance. That all of these things should be involved in this performance. So the first 5 that I just listed are all things that we've done before, so your time limits, and then the spatial, symbolic, gesture and non-sound choices that you're making, or audio choices that you're making. We've done all of those before, and in parentheticals you'll see that I've specified in a little bit more detail what kinds of things you might be thinking about there. Um, the thing that I do want to make sure to make clear here is that your sorry. The thing that I wanted to make clear is that for the moments of gesture, so the two clear moments of gesture for body gesture, and the one clear non-word sound choice, that those in parentheses say per performer next to them, as in if you are performing in a group, each one of you has to gesture twice. Each one of you has to incorporate at least one non-sound choice. So just make sure that you are reading those general requirements carefully. And then finally, as I just said, I am asking each group to clearly incorporate and revise your multi-text performances in creating them into this new product. But that is the general nature of the project, so hopefully that goes pretty smoothly. So if you have any questions, then please feel free to email me or make an appointment with me in office hours. The workshops for this performance will start on Thursday, so that is right around the corner. So also please start emailing me to make appointments. I'm again happy to make appointments to talk to you on Thursday, Friday, and then on Monday if you can't meet prior to that. So please do reach out to make appointments with me. I also can be available likely on sometimes on Saturday if that becomes necessary for your schedule. Okay, so now let's briefly transition to talk about your final exam. I'm going to go into less detail about this because you can read, and there are a lot of little nuts and bolts things here, but it's really not as bad as it looks, so I don't want you to get freaked out looking at it. So the idea here is that you're going to write a short paper for your final examination that is 3 to 4 pages in length. So that is not long. That is, in fact, almost exactly how much you wrote for your midterm, if not a little bit less. I do expect this to be a little bit more polished, but the way in which you're going to be evaluated on this is more about content than anything else, as usual. So when you look at the final exam prompt, which you'll again find on the same worksheet or on the same assignment prompt sheet we were just looking at, you'll see that the premise for the project is that we have loved your performances in your work in COM 160. So your individual or your group performance has been selected to be considered for the funding by the National Endowments for the Arts. So the final exam is that you're going to write a grant proposal of some kind, saying that my work fits into the objectives of the National Endowment for the Arts, and there are 3 categories. We'll talk about them in a second. And this is what I did in my project, and this is why I feel like it's a good fit, and this is what I would do if I had more funding. So that is basically the rundown. So you'll see if you scroll down to the next page that there are 3 basic categories that you can write in relationship to. These are taken from a couple of years ago, so don't be confused if you go onto the NEA website right now and these categories are different. The first one is Challenge America, which considers projects that extend the reach of the arts to underserved populations. Creativity Connects, which are projects that mutually benefit both the arts and non-arts sectors by demonstrating the beneficial contributions of artists and creative work to societal health, building bridges to new constituencies, and supporting infrastructure for the arts to work in new ways with new sectors: agriculture, business, economic development, science, technology, etc. So that is about thinking about how your project might help people in other fields in some way, shape, or form. And then finally, Our Town Livability, which concerns projects that go into helping transform local communities by making them more livable, by making them more lively, by making them more aesthetically rich, or by confronting social issues. So these are the 3 main categories that you can be thinking about when you're thinking about writing for funding. It would be, I am proposing my project fits into this category for these reasons, or will contribute to, for instance, our town livability's objectives by doing X, Y, and Z. So that is sort of the idea in general. If you want to do research on an independent residency or fellowship or something else that either you are actually interested in applying to personally at some time in the future, or that you just think is more on the nose for your project, please feel free to shoot me an email and ask me if that's okay, and it probably will be. But if you don't feel like your project really specifically fits into any of these categories, that is okay. As I say in the instructions, when you are writing for fellowships and grants in your professional life, whether you're a performer or an artist or an academic, or whether you are probably applying for some other kind of funding in like a business or something, you're always going to be creative in the way that you say that your research applies to a particular theme. So creativity, thinking about how you might get work that doesn't exactly fit the application description to fit the application description, is a professional skill as far as these things go. But again, you can find something. If you don't like any of those categories, you can do research on another residency, fellowship, source of funding that you could apply for, and that would be okay with me as long as you let me know first. So your final exam will take the form of a 3 to 4 page proposal in which you will draw from at least 3 different sources from our class discussion. At least 3 different sources from our class discussion. And this is really important. So I just want to make sure we don't overlook this. The idea is that your proposal will have to integrate sources from our class discussion in justifying the decisions you made in your final project and discussing why you think that your performance is important and deserves to be funded. So I am asking you to write this project with citations and in-depth citations, even though you typically would not probably put those in a proposal. You will now. So draw from at least 3 different sources from our class discussions. And in doing so, you should explain to the committee the following things. You should explain the educational, political, or social social, or cultural aims of your work. That is, what is your your performative intervention? What are you interested in talking about? What sort of change are you interested in using performance to make? So why do you think your work is important in the way that we've been talking about performance as politically, educationally, socially, or culturally valuable over the course of the semester? In your discussion, you're supposed to cite 3 substantive choices you made during your performance in the context of these objectives. That is, what are 3 choices you made in an attempt to achieve those educational, political, social, or cultural aims? Then you need to also include, C is a discussion of at least 2 performers or performances you consider to be influences on your project and why. So this is, you want to talk about 2 people or 2 performance groups of some kind that you think are inspiration or inspired your own work. And these don't have to specifically be from class discussion, but if they're not, you may need to talk about them in a little bit more detail just so I understand the connections you're drawing to your own work, and you might want to provide an example. So the next point is, D is a specific discussion of how your work connects to or stands to advance the causes in the NEA category you selected from above. So that is, how does my work connect to the fellowship or the scholarship I'm applying for? So as I said, be creative if it doesn't fit exactly, and if you want to apply for something different, just let me know. But the idea is there has to be at least I would say at least a paragraph probably of your essay needs to be dedicated to discussing why you think that your work matters, that you're applying for. Or deserves the money that you're applying for. So that is the main idea behind this next part, is that in writing for any fellowship or grant, a significant part of that discussion is going to be saying, here is how what I am interested in connects to what your organization, what your granting organization values, in this case, one of the specific NEA categories listed above, and that is your justification for why they should fund you in that way. The next part of your justification is you want to talk about at least one thing that you want to expand on your performance with the funding that would be provided. So, again, don't research how much funding you would get. You can pretend it's as much money as you want to, unless you are looking into something specifically you actually want. But the idea here is you're going to tell us what you would do next with your performance if you were to receive this funding. So this doesn't have to be that you are necessarily changing your performance itself or really upgrading your performance in that way. It could instead be that you want to convert your performance into a workshop series or give a series of lectures on developing performances like the kind you gave, or perform in specific communities where you feel like this performance would make the most impact. So you don't have to say, oh, I would buy better lights and sound and stuff and make this performance really good. You want to think about what you would do with the funding that, again, would advance the objectives you're talking about in the introduction, right? Or the objectives that the NEH has that guide their distribution of the funding. So this is, again, an argument for you receiving the funding you're asking for that says, this is the next step, and this is how I hope that my intervention would actually produce the change that I am saying that it is intended to produce. So that is the objective for your final examination, is for you to write this 3 to 4 page funding proposal. You do not have to answer those questions in that particular order. Of course, I would write it in a way that flows. I might even do research on what some people's funding proposals have looked like in the past by simply Googling that. That is oftentimes something that is really generative, is to look at other examples of people's work. But here I'm honestly not going to be super concerned that you know the formal things that you need to be doing in application for a fellowship or a grant. That will come later. This is sort of your first shot at practicing that. What I really am looking for here is an in-depth discussion of its work and its value that uses our class themes and our class readings in order to explain, frame, or justify that value. So that's the idea behind your final examination. And again, that is not something that, I mean, obviously I just went through exactly what is required. You can start working on this today if you want to. The idea is that you'll work on it in a combination with your final project. They're both concerned with the same things and come out of the same work. And that on our final examination period, which is next Tuesday, I believe, you will be posting these at the beginning of our examination time, or I mean, let's say at the end of our examination time. That seems to work just as well. So post these at the end of our examination time. And in posting them, you will be posting your final presentations and your final exams, and you will be done. So there won't be a requirement for you to actually sit and take the exam during our final exam period once again. This is something where you will submit this at the end, and you should be working on this alongside your final project. So this shouldn't be you're sitting down in 3 hours to try to slam something out. This should be something you're working on piece by piece, side by side with your final project or your final performances. So that is the rundown of those two things. It's a little bit long of an instructional video, but we did have to cover those two different assignments. So again, this is posted on Sakai, and please reach out to me if you have any questions. Otherwise, your readings for tomorrow are posted, and there will be a normal lecture over readings tomorrow. That will be our last normal lecture reading, or normal reading lectures, and then on Thursday we'll start our workshops again. So I'm really enjoyed the summer session with y'all. It's pretty crazy that this is our last real week of class, and I'm really looking forward to see how things develop from here. So please let me know if you have questions, and otherwise I will talk to you tomorrow.